Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic IHC event. I am Kate Bridle, your IHC events host. Thank you so much for spending your breakfast time, lunchtime, whatever time it may be for you with us today. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Streamline AI, thanks to whom this CLE is free for all of you. We love it so much when things are free, which is they always are with us. So I also want to thank our fantastic presenters today, Kathy Zhu of Streamline AI and Margot Oshri of Snappy, who are going to talk to us about what high-performing legal teams do differently. This is our 15th event of the year. So with that, I'll hand things over to you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's wonderful to be back again. Love, love, love community, all the amazing people here. So excited to be here with Margot. Just quick peek at the agenda we have ahead of us today for the next hour. And I wanted to go into some introductions. Margot Oshri, who's here with me today, is the Director and Associate General Counsel at Snappy. Snappy is a B2B to C SaaS platform and e-marketplace that helps companies send personalized gifts at scale in support of their employee and customer engagement, retention, and loyalty strategies. Closely with the General Counsel and cross-functional leaders, she's guided Snappy through multiple phases of legal maturity using practical business-first frameworks to move legal from a reactive support function into an organizational leader. Her work focuses on designing legal processes that support speed, clarity, and repeatable execution across every touch point with legal, with the dual goal of ensuring the legal team scales with the business while also freeing up enough time and mental space for lawyers to think deep thoughts. I love that. With 2 decades of legal experience in the US and Israel, Margot has held senior in-house roles at large public technology companies, as well as a late-stage hypergrowth scale-up where she built and refined legal functions to support business operations around the globe. Early in her career, she advised venture-backed startups on corporate and transactional matters as a law firm associate. She's worked as a lobbyist at a nonprofit organization. And the perspective that she gained from working in these diverse organizations, along with her experience managing the day-to-day work in the trenches, simultaneously solving cross-functional executive-level problems, looking to move beyond firefighting and bottlenecks towards becoming trusted strategic partners. I can attest to this, having known Margot now for the past year or more. We are so lucky to have someone like you, the way that you think and how innovative and strategic your practice, your guidance has been for the companies you've worked for. We're so lucky to have you here. Would you like to say a few words to our audience, Margot?
Thank you. I'm very flattered. As you will hear in the seminar, that really good lawyers need good tools. And I really appreciate Kathy. And you might not know this about her, and hopefully she will share this with you very soon. But this is all coming from her own experience as an in-house lawyer. And I think that's something that's really important when you're assessing any tools that you want to use, that it's really helpful to get a tool that has a lot of personal experience and somebody who's lived what you lived.
Awesome. Thanks, Margot. Thank you so much. So I just very quickly, I'm the co-founder, CEO, and currently also the GC of Streamline AI. Streamline is an AI-powered intake and matter management platform. I spent over 10 years practicing law. At this point, actually close to 15. First at Wilson Sonsini, big law firm in the West Coast. And then I went in-house at Medallia, the 5th lawyer hired at DoorDash, where I built the commercial legal function from scratch. So while I was at DoorDash, just to give the audience a bit of context, I saw the company grow from about 1,000 people to 7,000 people. The legal team went from 5 when I joined to 100 during my time there. And in order to meet that level of growth, I founded legal operations as well. It was during my 4 years at DoorDash where I had a series of aha moments. That's what ultimately led me to found Streamline with a Google product leader and an AI expert. So just sharing some of the aha moments with the audience, I get asked this question a lot, like what made you want to jump from being a lawyer to founding a company? So one was just realizing there were so many contracting tools in the market. What we were really missing is a centralized place to actually manage and get visibility into all of our work, not just contracts, so that we're not living in a black box every day trying to guess what's going on. So you'll see some of that, right, reflected in the benchmarking study that we're doing around efficiency. I saw a deep need to automate the legal front door to reduce and eliminate back and forth, streamline our processes, get metrics to actually showcase our value. Very quickly, and then we'll go into the webinar. We've been around since 2020. We've over 90 companies working with us, high growth tech companies like Margot's team at Snappy, also Logitech, Superhuman, Gusto, highly regulated entities like hospitals, banks, health tech and biotech companies, Hims, Envita, Icon Therapeutics, and many others. So excited to talk to you all today about the 2026 Legal Efficiency Benchmark. Purpose of this is to shine a light into the black box of legal efficiency across our entire industry. There's been so much noise with AI and technology. Every day, we're waking up to a new announcement, and I'm sure there are many, many moments you've all wondered, am I still alone just living in this chaos? What's going on, right? Why am I still dealing with this? And are the other people in the same boat as me? And, how does my team stack up against other legal teams? How do we really start moving out of this world of chaos into one that is predictable, efficient, and organized, where everyone knows what's going on? So that's why we've issued the first of its kind legal efficiency benchmarking report. But before we dive into the results, let's just spend a minute to talk about who this data represents, because context really matters. On this slide, you'll see a breakdown by legal team size. We've heard from teams across the spectrum, from very small teams of 1 to 4 lawyers, all the way to departments with 20 plus lawyers, some of them many, many more than that. What I think is really important here is that this is not a benchmark that's skewed towards one type of legal organization, right? So no matter, we're seeing a lot of lean teams, some mid-sized teams, but also a meaningful number of large legal departments dealing with real complexity in their day-to-day work. You'll also see that there is a very diverse set of roles of people who responded, right? We've got CLOs and GCs, VPs and AGCs, legal ops leaders, individual lawyers. So the data is coming from people across roles as well. This mix is very intentional. The substance of work that you do may differ depending on your role, but the pain points around efficiency and throughput tend to show up across all of them. The reason why I'm calling all this out is because everything you're about to see applies regardless team size and role, whether you're leading the function or deep in the work. But starting with the big picture now, what we've learned across this assessment of in-house legal departments is that operational maturity is not random, follows a very clear progression. There are teams that are really just trying to keep up with volume. There's some teams that have started to build some real structure around what they're doing. And then there's a very small group that's truly operating at a high level. What's interesting is that this is not about headcounts or budgets, which we're going to go into why. Much more about how work enters the legal team, how it moves through the team, and how visible and measurable that work is. When those pieces are missing, even the strongest and most capable attorneys end up firefighting. But when they're in place, suddenly everything's going to feel calmer, more predictable, and so that you can actually do the more strategic work that Margot was talking about earlier. The goal today is to show you where your team currently sits on the maturity curve, what's driving that score, and what it takes to move you into the next tier. So this slide is one of my favorites. What you see on the slide is performance distribution, right? So you can see number of people that have answered, responded to the survey, where they fall in terms of efficiency. And it tells a very encouraging story. What we're seeing is that most legal teams are landing on that lower end of the maturity spectrum, right, in the needs improvements bucket. And only about 1 in 10 are scoring very highly on efficiency. That may sound concerning at first, but actually what we're finding is that legal teams are really, really smart. They're experienced. They're working incredibly hard. This is not a talent issue. What's really holding teams back is actually structure and process. Most are still managing work very manually through emails and spreadsheets, unstructured intake, leading to a lot of reactive workflows and a lot of very unnecessary friction. So the takeaway here is that inefficiency isn't something you eliminate with team size by hiring more people, but in fact, that can actually make it worse. The teams at the highest part of the band are showing you that once you put the right systems and structure in place, a very different way of working becomes possible. So I'd love to hear, Margot, from you. You have deep experience in this. How does all of this resonate with you?
Well, for me, one of the major issues that I had, right, is this idea, and I think a lot of us lawyers have this, is this perfectionism, right? Like, I can do it all. I can handle whatever they throw at me. I can be there for everyone. And also, especially a lot of us that came maybe from a law firm to in-house have this like service mentality of, I'm a support function and I need to, whatever they throw at me it's my job to handle it. And first of all, it's just taking a minute, right? It's being able to just take a beat and say, is this actually something that I need to be working on? One of the things that really stood out to me is like bottleneck. And it wasn't a legal issue that was really the problem. It was like, I was just holding the paper. But I'm sure all of us have opened up a contract and like half of the red lines in there have nothing to do with legal. It had to go to a different team. It has to whatever. And because it's in a piece of paper, nobody opened it and read it, and I'm chasing finance to get approvals on things, or I'm chasing the product team like, hey, can we even do that? It got to be very complicated for me, at least, to be the one holding the paper. And so one of the things that I was really focused on is like, okay, how do I get rid of at least that, right? How do I handle not being the traffic cop? And so that really comes out of like building playbooks and trying to figure out like who's the right decision maker on these things. How do we run these approvals? How do I get approvals quickly? Because Lord knows we don't need another Slack channel where I'm trying to chase people for approvals. And so really just kind of saying who's accountable. This is me, this is you. And if there's a delay, right, to be able to say, actually, that wasn't with me. It wasn't my job to handle that part. So I think that when you take legal out of the traffic cop position, you get system improvement almost automatically.
Yeah, Margot, is always incredible to me how much time we were spending, or I was spending, just to your point, the coordination, right? Figuring out not only who needs to approve, but then getting that person all of the context so they can actually do the approval. That meant sequencing emails, that meant chasing things down. And that took me ultimately away from the actual substantive work. And to your point, then you feel like you're just holding things up when actually you never needed to be in the first place. That, I think, is something that we're seeing, by the way, across the board, no matter what size legal department you're with. Large companies, I hear that can actually be worse, right? Even with more people, more hands on deck. I love this quote. This came from you, Margot, in an attempt to be everywhere and do everything. Like,
one of the things like I say is my superpower is like I'm in a lot of meetings. I talk to all the departments. So legal, I think, is really, especially in a company like mine where I have a very small legal team, I'm call that my superpower. I can connect the dots. I can say, you know, hey, they're working this on this department and over here, and bring everyone together. It's also my downfall because hear everything and then I see risk and I you know, I'm looking at Slack and I'm reading the Slack channels and I say like, oh my God, did you hear this? Did you do this? And part of that is just, you know, I can't be everywhere and do everything, and realizing it's not my job to manage the risk of the company. It's my job to map out the risks, to help people be able to identify those risks and to give them the tools that they need to educate themselves on the risk and to be an advisor. But ultimately, the budget holder or the person who's going to take the fall for the risk really needs to be the one who is making that call. And so it's about really, you know, taking some of the burden of the risk holding off of myself, helping other people, I guess, kind of do what I do. Obviously, I'm there to provide the legal advice and to let them bring the information to me rather than me feeling like I need to be in every room.
That's beautifully said. High performing legal teams aren't just absorbing risk, right? They're helping to allocate it. In fact, Margot, I remember you saying the very same thing to me. Legal teams are really responsible for three things, but we over index on one. So the first is managing risk, which Margot just talked about really well. The second is managing demand, managing the throughput of work that is constantly pouring in through your front door. And the third is supporting innovation. When we over-index on just managing risk and taking all that on ourselves, we're actually letting managing demand fall by the wayside. And we're going to actually discuss this in some detail in this presentation. When we are not doing a good job of managing that demand, we fall down completely on that third element, which is supporting innovation. And that's really what up-levels legal into being a strategic partner.
Oh, no, I was just going to add to that. You know, one of the first things, there's always going to be risk. I guess the question is like, what's the substance of that risk? Companies take risks all the time and they make a lot of money from it and it's actually good, right? And so the question is that a risk that legal actually needs to be aware of, right? And so that is just one first step of being able to cut down what you're saying, the demand, right? Maybe it doesn't even need to pass through legal at all.
That's a really, really good point. Sometimes I think we end up feeling like because we are, quote unquote, the adults in the room, we have to participate, we have to answer every single question. There is a level of figuring out who the right owners actually need to be, helps us accelerate faster. In the report here, really interesting, right? Because it actually does challenge a pretty common assumption that if you just add more people, things will run better, right? We feel crushed by the volume. Immediately, the knee-jerk reaction is, okay, we need to hire. What we're actually seeing from this survey is that both ends of the spectrum are struggling. The teams with 1 to 4 lawyers, small legal departments, but also the inefficiency, that the second highest bucket of inefficiency comes from the really large legal departments, 20 people or more. Small teams are obviously stretched thin, right? fire hose is happening every day. You're managing everything through emails and spreadsheets. You're just trying to stay on top of everything. Really hard to step back and build repeatable processes when you're just fighting fires, when you're just slaying dragons. But on the other hand, very large legal departments also run into problems, a different problem. It's a problem of complexity. And the complexity is growing faster. You're starting to see lots of different intake channels, tons of different applications, Slacks going, emails, productivity applications. Force, you're getting pinged on everything. Information is incredibly siloed. Flows are very inconsistent. You may have one thing figured out here, but everything else is a mess. I saw this, by the way, compressed into 6 months while I was at DoorDash. All of this really, really starts to create noise that slows you down. Interestingly, the teams that perform the best actually tend to be the mid-sized teams, around 11 to 19 lawyers, big enough to start feeling the friction. They recognize the need for process, but they're still small enough to actually identify what's breaking and fix it. And maybe there's a little bit of that stepping back, the ability to step back and actually see what's going on. Again, here is that scale by itself does not create efficiency. You need the right operational foundation. You need to really start building out those processes before you massively layer on headcount. Otherwise, you're actually falling into more chaos, not more capacity. So Margot, you've seen a lot of growth over the years, maybe at Snappy and even other companies. Please, love to hear from you. As your team evolved, did size alone ever fix anything?
For me, I would say size alone. I went from very large public company that had legal team, not as large as 100, but we were, 40 people, which felt like it was huge, to now my team is very small. One of the things we're constantly trying to justify our headcount, especially in a smaller organization. There are all sorts of ways that companies decide how many lawyers, right number given the complexity and the revenue. Sometimes it's hard for me I'm dying, I need more people. But I actually encountered it kind of in a different way. Lawyers are very expensive and we sit in G&A, right? So that's constantly on my mind. Everything I ask is going to be like mark on the books, and I'm going to have to justify it harder than pretty much everybody else in the company. It actually turned out where I lost headcount, could survive, was to double down on the structure. How am I going to get all of these requests? Everybody is slacking me and doing all the things. My personal favorite, when I get tagged in a Word Google Doc and then I have to go find it later. There's just so much there that what I really did in that moment was to take a step back and figure out, how am I going to manage this? So how am I going to teach other people? I had full Notion pages of sales, how to interact with legal. Here's step-by-step instructions. I have a whole Streamline for the sales team page, which is, forget everyone else in the company sales. I'm going to walk you through with screenshots of how to submit tickets and to do everything. Before I can ever go and ask for more headcount, I don't even know. I don't know what I need until I can classify what I'm working on. Maybe I need some fractional help.
Capturing the work coming in across all these different places.
Well, there's two things. One is that we created SLAs. I think we actually based it off of you have a template SLA that we decided to adopt for our team. And what does it mean? I acknowledge that it comes in. I give an update of where it is. One of the rules of that SLA is these SLAs don't count unless you've actually submitted it in the proper way. So if you haven't submitted a Streamline ticket, all bets are off. I'll get to it when I get to it. So for me, that was actually really freeing. So when people Slack me or they, some random thing, I can actually just say file a ticket, right? And I'll deal with it when I'm done working on what I'm working on right now. So for me, that was great, right? And I don't feel guilty about that anymore. One of the other things, obviously, you may not want to tell your CEO to go file a ticket, right? That's not something that you do, and they're going to Slack you or they're going to email you, whatever it is. One of the things I like about Streamline, and I would actually say for anything, right? So subtly turn that into a ticket. There's little tools where I can just automatically send it over. Again, I want to track what I'm doing, and I want to be able to show the work that I did and the advice that I gave and capture it all in one space without, sending the executive to follow the process, which they probably won't do anyway. For me, it was a way to, again, you just got to get all the data in one spot. Until you have everything in one spot, you have no idea what you're dealing with.
And then it becomes, to your point, really hard to actually advocate for the headcount, right? And get the people that you really need. So teams are hitting a clear capacity breaking point. So if you look at this, on this slide, it's showing you request volume is growing, efficiency is just dropping. really, really significantly. So this is one of the findings that instantly resonates with legal leaders because it puts a real number behind a feeling that all of us already have, which is this rising sense of panic when things really, really start to pour in. The data shows a very clear tipping point. Once a lawyer is handling about 10 or more requests a week, performance, which is what's being measured by the y-axis, is dropping off very quickly by nearly 30%. At lower volumes, teams can kind of make it work. And by the way, every single request you get, if it's all manually handled, results in so many additional touches, right? All the touches it takes to do the back and forth, just to get the context, just so you can know what you're working on. And then, like what we were saying earlier, having to quarterback, loop all the people in. So every request turns exponentially into 10 other things you have to do. And then once you start multiplying that out, you can see what we're talking about here. So a lot of people at lower volumes are just using their email inbox as a sorting pen. I've been there. I'm sure lots of you maybe are still living in this where you mark things unread, right, that need your action. And then you come back and you reopen that email 10 more times. A lot of heroics just to keep things moving. But once the volume starts to increase, all of those cracks start to show, right? If I asked you point blank at 3 different points today, are you really working on the highest priority thing for the business at this moment? Would you actually honestly be able to say yes? Or are you really just handling something for somebody that's yelling the loudest and escalating the hardest? Going back again and again to those same emails, opening it, reopening it, deciding, okay, no, this is not something I need to do right now. Such a waste of time. So the key insight is that getting out of this manual world is absolutely critical. The data that we're showing in this report actually finally gives you some concrete proof of something you've long suspected, right? Which is that unmanaged demand doesn't just feel overwhelming, it actually directly is crippling your performance. And the breaking point happens a lot faster than people expect because the business teams are growing way faster than the legal team. So, Margot, what was that breaking point for you? What did that look like? What made you realize that something had to change?
For me, my breaking point was just spending so much time reporting on what I was doing and updating in 20 different places, updating to my GC, I'm working on this contract, here's what I'm doing, and the sales team, this is, here are your contracts, and spreadsheets where I'm typing it in here, and then I'm typing it into Salesforce and typing it into different places, just trying to prove what I was doing all day long, which to me was taking time from the actual substantive work that I had to do. And I just realized like, this is insane. And, if I want to be able to give someone an update on where something stands, I want to just be able to say like, go to the ticket, read the update. So for me, that was something, I call it my notes to file. It is, for me, the context switching is the hardest, right? You're deep into a contract and then somebody slacks you and whatever, you have to take a call, you have to do whatever you're doing. Being able to go back a day later, 20 minutes later, and just remember what you were working on or leave a note to myself like, hey, remember to go check this. I have 10,000 Post-it notes on my desk. I'm sure I will never get over that part of it. But for me, just having a ticket with all the information in one spot was saving me time. Just being able to like link into the CLM that I'm using and link in my notes and here's this email and just having it all in one spot was a game changer. I just became more efficient. Instead of trying to find the email where they sent me that one thing, you might have like 4 separate emails. That I think was the most fundamental thing that gave me my time back in a way. Obviously, I hit a breaking point probably every other day. I find that coming back to this centralized repository of notes and data is actually helpful to me and centers me. And just having visibility, being able to give other people visibility into what I'm doing without having to rewrite everything is critical.
Burning the candle at both ends, barely seeing my family, and dealing with escalations at those moments and having to prove and spend hours actually justifying what was going on was emotionally so draining. Like that actually would wipe me out for the rest of the day where I could feel this incredible frustration. One quick story I wanted to share with everybody, just because this actually happened to me. One time at the end of the quarter, at about 7 a.m. in the morning, I was on the West Coast supporting a team on the East Coast, and I didn't respond for maybe 30 minutes or something, or 40 minutes, because I was getting ready for work. And they ended up escalating to also the General Counsel, also the CRO, and then also copied in the CEO. And that took out not just the rest of my morning, but also at the time, this is very early in my career, the head of commercial legal spent the next couple of hours like all just assembling the timeline of everything that went on and how responsive we're being. And to Margot's point, like if you could just point to a single place that just documented everything, you're just like, bam, right there. That's what I was like dying for, right? And having to actually do that work on top of end of quarter was beyond frustrating.
My sales team works heavily in Salesforce, and after a while, I really started reading Salesforce and was reading what they were writing, and half the time they would just say like waiting on legal, and I was like, what do you mean waiting on legal? Just because it's with me, whatever that means. Like, I'm not the holdup. I really like using, I mean, in Streamline, there's a status that says waiting on, and you can even like customize it. Sure, I'm waiting on the customer. I'm waiting on a cross-functional partner. And so I can, at a glance, really be able to say quickly, what does waiting with legal mean? The contract, as we all know, it takes a while. You're actually waiting on red lines. That would be rare, right? So there's just so many other things that come into play. And I think it's really important for us to be able to share that information and to share that with the sales team and to be able to tell your side of the story, right? Without coming back and saying, no, it was you and no, it was you, but really have the receipts to be able to say, actually, as of this was sent 4 months ago to the other side, it just came back 2 days ago. There's all of these other things, and we're actually waiting on a cross-functional partner to say if this is even possible for us to do. So once I have all of that information, I will happily give everyone an update, right? So for me, it's really just about changing the narrative a bit. We don't want to disappoint the customer.
So that is exactly why we started to automate the measurement of it, because it's a PR tool. What this slide is all about. And you can actually see in the chart teams that are working still with emails and spreadsheets. And by the way, like you can actually set up a spreadsheet, right, with different statuses and do the things that we're talking about as a first step, but then you have to kind of manually keep that updated. It's definitely better than nothing at all. So what's important here is that this isn't just about better lawyers, quote unquote. It's not about experience. It's not about team size. It's literally what the system is allowing you to do or how much the system is freeing up your time and providing consistency, right? Automating approval steps, standardizing communication, again, so you don't have to do the back and forth, giving you the real-time visibility. If you don't have that, you are basically flying blind, or you're trying to get at all of that manually. So even incredibly capable teams spend time. So the takeaway is really simple, right? Technology is not just a productivity boost, actually sets the ceiling for how well a legal team can perform, or sets the framework and the structure.
Absolutely. What didn't I try? I mean, I tried all of the ones that I knew how to use, the spreadsheets and the Word documents, and obviously I'm very comfortable and probably most comfortable in those. And then I went back and I begged for tools, and so I said, "Hey, can I have Jira because that's how I submit a ticket for the engineering team, or can I have Asana or like any of the bespoke tools?" And then I realized like I'm trying to bend myself to use these tools that weren't developed for this. And what we're trying to do is manage a very expensive resource of the company. And so it doesn't make sense to use whatever's laying around, right? You want to be able to use a tool that was built for a legal team, that's optimized for a legal team, so that you're using that really expensive resource in the most efficient way. What have I done if I only have half the company submitting tickets this way? I still can't track my data and I can't have all my stuff in one spot. When I started to look for a tool, that was something that was very important to me, that it was built for legal teams. And so I was able to do the work that I needed with the confidentiality and the things that I needed that were specific to the work that I was doing. This idea of just the context as well, and being able to do everything from one spot, right? I mean, it seems so silly, but a contract comes in and you review it, and just being able to integrate with the tools that I use that have these like native integrations that are fairly simple to set up, and I don't need to go ask the IT team or go to RevOps and ask for too much. I can manage it all by myself, was really important to me because I like to customize it. And a little while later, I'll tell you some of the customizations I've done, but I really wanted to have that flexibility to be able to put what I needed into the tool, sign a document from the same place where I had everything there, and and then once it's signed, just have it pop right up. So I don't need to tell someone, hey, your document's been signed. It just actually goes there and they get an update that the document was signed saves me that extra email. That was a great thing.
They add up, and also it reduces the context switching, right? I think when we switch context, we forget how much extra time it takes for us to actually get reabsorbed into the task that we were doing before. One other thing that I'm wondering, Mark, is I've heard actually people ask about this over the years, which is the concept of, well, what legal teams really ought to be doing is this white glove, very personal kind of consultative service, right? That we're delivering. When you put a system in place, does it reduce that? Does it make it feel more transactional, or does it actually enable you to get more, even more of that done?
I mean, I would say it's exactly what I strive for every day, right? So one of the things I have on our intake form, before you even submit this ticket, do these resources help you? Because I answer the same question 100 times a day. I mean, fair to the people who are asking the question, it's not always the same person, but there are only so many times I can ask our SOC 2 report, right? Like, and so I have, before you submit this InfoSec request, have you checked this? You know, and giving them the resources to go do it on their own, which then frees me up. Instead of answering that question over and over again, I have the time to give that white glove, that the strategic thinking that I think we all actually would prefer to be doing every day.
I think it also highlights something important about the fact that technology alone doesn't solve everything. And hopefully, and by the way, I 1,000 million times agree with that, right? If you put just a system into a team that isn't thinking operationally at all and doesn't have any processes built at all, and you're not actually doing the work that's necessary to enable that system to actually succeed, it's not, right? So the reason why we asked Margot to be on this webinar is because she's showing everybody, and me too, like what an operationally minded leader can do. Everything she's doing is thinking, around how do I not have to repeat this over and over and over again, right? How do I put the right knowledge documents in place so that people can self-serve, right? Like all of that is absolutely essential. And yes, just, no matter if you have the best design tool in the whole world, you still can't get into the same outcome unless you're actually doing the things that Margot's recommending. So, okay, we're getting to our first poll here. What tool does your legal team use to actually track and manage their work today? So it's really just helpful information for us, but also for you, where we're going to share the poll results once it's completed, just to get a sense of how are people actually working. So the results are coming in right now, and I am seeing by far the majority of people here, about 50% of all respondents are using spreadsheets, emails, Slacks, and Teams. About 130 of you have responded. 63 said you're handling it completely manually. 12 of you said you're using a Jira or an IT ticketing system or similar. About 3 of you are using a general purpose productivity tool like Asana, Airtable, or ClickUp. 27 of you are using a CLM to track and manage your work. So of course, that's only contracts and not the other 50%, which is, so we all know nothing to do with contracts. 9 of you are using custom internal tools that IT's built for you. It's very interesting. Great for you that you've got the resourcing for that. And then 15 of you are using a purpose-built legal intake tool, which is actually already better than in the past, where I've seen like 1 or 2. But the state of reality is most people are still living very manually.
I wanted to just say one thing. The great thing about a purpose tool, or not a spreadsheet, again, like depending on what you're using, it's just keeping track of the decisions and the advice that you've already given. Oh, I know I answered this somewhere, and we all have this, right? And if it's in a contract, that's one thing, you can use your CLM, but where's the like product counsel or whatever I was just answering, the marketing question, being able to search and go right back to it and jump in. And for me, that's something that's really great. And also just using it as like a decision log to be able to say, this is what was decided in this point, or this is at this point, these were the facts that were important here. I think it's really good to give further context, because in 6 months, I'm not going to remember what I was working on.
It becomes a knowledge base at the end of the day, right? And when someone goes out on leave on your team, or someone departs completely, think about, I've been panicked in the past, like, oh my gosh, what did that person do? What did that person say? And there are questions about it, that I now have to field. So yeah, that's another reason. Thank you,
I
Margot.
mean, we don't even have to go that far. If somebody just wants to take a vacation day, which would be nice, we'd love to give our teams vacation days. It's really easy to step in for somebody and just get caught up quickly on the ticket and be able to see what they were working on rather than having to do, they don't take that vacation day because they would have to do a full offloading just to bring someone up to speed to fill in for them.
The number of times I've gone on vacation for like a week and come back and nothing has moved because no one wanted to touch any of my things. That's actually really sad for the business, right? The fact that, and I'm sure I wasn't alone. I'm sure that happens all the time. Back to what we were talking about, right? Centralizing everything you're working on is one of the foundational pieces of high performance. Finding is maybe simple, but incredibly powerful. When we look at the data, the strongest common thread among high performing teams is centralizing that work, right? We know exactly how it comes in, how it's categorized, how it moves forward. On the flip side, low performing teams are almost always dealing with fragmented intake, requests coming in through emails, Slack, hallway conversations, spreadsheets, everything in between. This kind of chaos at the front door makes it nearly impossible to stay organized downstream. This isn't just an administrative step, it's actually foundational. I always think about that as step one. And then once you've organized and sorted your home, basically, right? Then you can actually start layering so much more stuff on top of it because you actually know what's going on. This is really not a nice to have the way I look at it. It's like, how can you actually work if everything around you is a mess? Right? And you've got boxes piled up everywhere, like kind of like the home analogy. There's so much talk today about AI, everything. What I think about is that is just technology at the end of the day. It's no different from any other technology. It's meaning that it's really there it's the means, it's not the end. The end is actually looking at what are the outcomes that we want to drive? What world do we want to live in? So, Margot, if you were talking to someone at the very start of their journey, and it sounds like that's like half of our audience that are still living right in that completely manual world, and they want to start creating a centralized repository for legal work and data, what would you tell them? How would you advise them along this journey?
I would say all goes back to knowledge is power, right? And you don't know what you don't see in one spot. You've got to at least have one place where you're centralizing everything, where you're keeping your data, and if that's a spreadsheet, great, but you have to be able to just see it in one spot and collect the data. Because once you have that data, you actually become a powerhouse in the organization because you're able to offer some more information and to give some more context to things that are happening. And you become somebody who's important to have at the table. I would say don't over-engineer it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just start collecting everything into one spot. And then and then try not to make any exceptions as much as you can. Once you do that, like you've got to kind of sort your work into buckets, right? I think most of us kind of you've got your revenue side, you've got your procurement side, maybe you do a little marketing, again, like a small team where I'm doing it all, or maybe you have a dedicated stream that you're working on, but you can know there's going to be some intake questions. How many times do we get a request for somebody where they just like kick it over the fence to us? And they're like, for your review. And you're like, right. And so being able to create your work streams to know this is the information before I can even touch this. I need these facts to give me context. And then, one of the things that I've really started to ask people is, you tell me how strategic this is. I don't know. I'm not involved in the everyday decision making of everything that happens in this company. Is this important? Is this a nice to have? Is this the whole company is going to fall down if we don't get this? And obviously, check that amongst others, because some people are always going to say that theirs is the most important. But that's something that's very important to me is creating these streams and knowing what people are asking, and then being able to build playbooks, right? Because we want to be able to have people do things on their own. And so if there are decisions that they can make, or if you can point things out to them, I don't review all of our marketing materials or, contracts for somebody, they're having an offsite and they need, like a conference, a ballroom or something like that. I'm not going to read the contract. There's not much I can do with that. I can't negotiate it. So I say, here, this is what I would expect to see. If you want to be able to cancel, this is what you should see. Like you give them the pointers on how to negotiate the contract. You don't need me for that. So that would be the next thing. And then And again, just the playbooks and documenting it. And then really, once you have that data, you go to, especially, I do this with the sales team, right? Everybody's got their requests. And then you go to the leadership and you say, I have 27 requests from your team. I need you to tell me which one I should be working on first. It's not about me. I will work on whatever you want me to work on, but you have to make those tough decisions. And you also actually have to communicate that to your team. So it's not legal is the bad guy. Legal doesn't want. So we have thresholds of when we review red lines, things like that. And if you want the exception, great. Go to your leadership, tell them why this should qualify for an exception, what falls out, because they can't approve everything because then we're in the same situation. And so it's really about telling the company, right, we have this resource, it is a finite resource, and you get to use it, but you have to tell us how you want legal to approach your domain and what's most important there.
It's not an exception if it's going to be asked for every single time, right? And I actually one of our customers, Margot, gets the data from Streamline that actually measures how often an exception is granted. And then they go and sit down with the sales leader or whoever the business leader is responsible for that and say, should this even be an exception anymore? Because we've given this like 50% of the time. So you're just wasting my time basically asking for this. Can we just skip this and we take on the business risk of just giving it every time if you're not going to treat it like an exception? And that just like resets the conversation completely, right? So we're not actually just doing work that isn't necessary.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the other things I'm privy to, obviously, because especially in customer contracts, is that I can also track some of the requests, right? And so I can come back to the team and also say, like, customers, we rolled out this AI feature that everybody was super excited about, and it's really cool, and I love it. But I also wanted to point out that they don't love AI as much. And so when I am going to them to say, when you're selling this, you may also want to push the fact that we have an ISO certification and all the things that we're doing to make sure that our AI is safe. So don't just run with the really, really exciting AI part. Also follow up with some attention to the concerns that their legal team might have. And I was able to kind of surface that from, I can just like mark it now. I have a little field and I can mark it on my tool that says like, this is an AI issue. Just to tell them how many times a question comes up.
go ahead, Kate.
I am popping back in for the second CLE code. Oh, look at this. Someone just asked about it, and here I am. The second CLE code is KMK028. It's in the chat right now.
Actually, just can I double click on that a little bit, Margot? Because I think often it's kind of newsworthy to people what it is that they can actually start tracking. So it can be custom to whatever is going on in your organization. Important for you to tell the story you need to tell. So Margot gave a great example of actually tracking new AI tools that she's reviewing, right? That was your example, Margot, right? That was just it's really relevant right now because there's such an influx of that getting shipped and those types of requests getting flagged for legal. What's been really for legal departments that we're working with is t-shirt sizing, because not everything's equal. So when you're actually reporting on how much you're handling at the end of a quarter, really saying it's 300 requests doesn't mean very much. But when you can break that down to these were large t-shirt sizes, and then something else that Margot raised earlier, these were highly strategic requests to the business. And then once you layer on another piece, which is, hey, legal like exceeded the expectations because we met our SLAs or because we did XYZ. Like you can actually track all of that in a system that's purpose built. Think of how powerful that data becomes.
I mean, I can give you a few examples of what I do here, which is, we have these boards, the company's KPIs and the metrics, and I actually try to pull out the data that if we're looking at revenue, I try to see how many deals I touch that also were in the big deals of the quarter to be able really to tie our work in helps us tell our story. I don't know how many of you are working on end of the year reporting or you're budgeting right now, or you're doing your personal review. I forget stuff. Once it's done and I want it, it's great. And it was probably really big at the moment. And then I forget when I have to go do it. Putting a little notation for yourself, like this was a really big win. We were really excited about it. And then at the end of the year, you can actually pull that up and just remember. I mean, all of us, I'm sure, forget to track our wins. And this is just a way to have that so you can pull out that data really quickly when you have to present it in a board meeting or an executive team meeting to be able to quickly gather that information.
If you have been, really curious about how your team stacks up in this benchmarking survey, please scan the QR code on your phone or take a photo, do whatever you need to do, scan it, and then that'll take you to the survey and we'll share the results with you once you do that so you can see where you fall. So this slide challenges a common assumption. We talked about this already. If you add more lawyers, things will run better. Bringing Streamline in and the foundation you've set. It's really, really fun, I think, for the audience to hear how really forward-thinking leaders like you are getting value out of your tools, how you can push the boundaries. Let's actually go through your plan so that people can hear what's possible.
Sure. I mean, I have hopes and dreams, and the only thing limiting me is my time. So obviously I am trying to get to the place where I get to think my deep thoughts. I think CLMs are really great, like you said, for contracting, but it's such a small piece of what I actually do all day long. And so for me, what I want to do is to be able to, like I was saying, take the data that I'm writing, the advice that I'm giving every single day in these tickets, and to be able to play with some AI tools. And I know that Streamline's actually coming out with its own AI tools to be able to really easily extract that and summarize it and just put it again, like this idea of creating playbook from this, make an advice page for this. I want to turn this into a Notion for this team or that team. Something is different. Then it frees up my time to answer those. I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff. I mean, we have a separate procurement platform. And so my dream I'm working on is to integrate it so that when somebody is submitting it their request, that I can actually have it generate in Streamline. Again, just making sure that my work that I'm doing is all tracked in one spot. It's actually really easy. I just haven't gotten around to it. And just looking at the native integrations that your tools have, I'm taking my notes about what's happening in revenue contracts. I think I'm going to be able to push it back into Streamline, and so that my legal notes will actually end up where the sales team is, so I can correct some of those misconceptions because I'm not there to tell my story all the time.
And the amazing thing is, I think also when you work with an earlier stage company is that they're so hungry for exactly this type of feedback. And what's really, I know so much from my own practice, but it's so awesome for me to hear from customers like Margot that help us to shape and inform our roadmap. A lot of what she's talked about is actually it's either exists today or it's new. We can roll that out for Snappy, or it's actually coming, right? Especially the piece you talked about, never having to answer the same question twice, right? And being able to use AI to actually meet people exactly where they are. So super, super exciting. Wanted to talk about burnout a little bit as well, because this is just such a serious systemic problem within our profession. 74% of all respondents are saying that they are experiencing burnout in some form. And there's a common belief that burnout just comes with a job. Sometimes I joke that starting from law school, right, we've wanted to get your thoughts on this. Burnout isn't inevitable, right? It's structural. How did it show up for you and on your team, and what did you do?
I mean, listen, I joke. Burnout it's a weekly thing. It depends on what's happening. Obviously, Q4, everybody's crazier at the end of the month or whatever it is. But for me, it's really kind of taking a moment, honestly, setting expectations for people, being able to point them to say, like, thank you for your request. I know that this is acknowledging, right? I know you need this. I get that it's important. It's been received, right? Just not letting it kind of drop into a void. If you see that there's going to be some sort of delay or whatever it is, to set boundaries and say, being able to understand, like, is the house actually on fire? If not, then this will wait till tomorrow and I will get it to you tomorrow. You can give an update to whoever needs to hear that I got it. But just really communicating that, like I said, setting fair boundaries. None of us are saving lives. I mean, if you are working in a company that's saving lives, like, that's amazing. But I'm not saving lives every day. And so I have to have that proportion kind of in what I'm doing. And for me, it's really just this idea, again, of putting the prioritization back onto the different departments and saying, you can have it all, just not all at the same time. So you tell me what order I'm doing this in.
That's right. That's right. Set the boundaries, get the business to weigh in on what's actually important for them, have the P0 at the same time. So these types of structural frameworks that you can get everybody on board with actually helps you set the boundaries, right? That Margot is talking about. Last final hole, and then we'll look to wrap up pretty soon. What is your team's single biggest challenge? Is it trying to manage the process chaos? Is it having limited visibility into your work? Is it unclear status and ownership, negative perception of legal, lack of data, trouble securing more resources? So it'll be interesting, I think, to see, because I know I felt all of these pain points. Margot, you probably have too over time. I think it's clear of the 82 people that responded, 35 are dealing with process chaos. So chaos is still the single biggest challenge that everybody's living with. And great news, there's something that we can do about it. This is, yeah. So I'll put this on the slide. Feel free to take a screenshot. These are the 5 pillars of efficient teams. This is how you get yourself out of the process chaos, right? Step by step by step. You've already heard Margot and I basically talk about every single piece of this, but it's all implementable, right? As long as you know what you need to do, you can take all of these steps. But this is really, really the solution to the higher performance that we were talking about. The IHC question, they posed this. If you want to learn more, if you want to talk to us, here are the final takeaways slide. But thank you so much. I want to say to everybody that tuned in, clearly you care about this. You want to, make your department, help your department become more efficient. You want to get out of feeling burnout, and there's definitely a better tomorrow that's possible. So huge thanks to Margot for sharing your wisdom and insights with all of us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy and Margot, both of you. This was such a good conversation. There was so much commiseration happening in the chat and so many people saying like it was like therapy. They were so relieved to find out they were not the only ones dealing with this, which is another big contributing factor to burnout. For those of you who don't know, I burned out of the legal profession and then I made a whole podcast about the issue of burnout in the legal profession. So it's very near and dear to my heart. And that feeling of isolation and like it's just me, I'm the only one having this problem is such a huge part of that. So these sessions are really important and we appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge and also just the opportunity to let people know that they are not alone. It's very important. We did have some questions. Do you both have time to hang out for another little minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Yeah, so someone said there was an answer to this in the chat, but I think also it would be valuable to hear from you. So how do you prioritize working on requests or matters that don't have a specific deadline, but need to be addressed before the client feels neglected or before it turns into a 5-alarm fire?
If I understand, like I actually just ask them, right? I ask them to define what they need and how can we break this up? What I really like to get an understanding from the requester, like, is this something that's blocking your work? Or you can't move forward without it? Is this a nice to have? Because then I can set myself accordingly and also just, pressure checking that. I go to my GC and I say like, where does this fit into the greater scheme of, what our company is focusing on right now? And where, what would the exec team say about that? If it is urgent and I have to like push this ahead of other things.
Great. Okay. And then last question for Margot specifically. And if you answered this at some point and I missed it, Margot, please just asked and answered me. But someone asked, it'd be interesting to hear how you mapped out people and processes and then implemented those into the tool.
I'm not sure. So mapping out the people and processes, I mean, a lot of the things were just kind of tracking what types of requests I was getting. And I mean, this is why I like it being a tool that is bespoke for legal teams because I don't have to go and ask someone to do something. I literally spin up new things all the time. I'm like, just today, I was like, oh, I should have a form for X, right? And I can just kind of iterate on that. But what I did is just kind of mapped out the types of requests that I was getting and then turn that into a form so people could figure it out. I also have a junk drawer of like, I don't know, here's my legal request, and they shoot over. And then from there, it kind of, I can add different blocks, like it's a little square. So I can keep track of the data that I want to have, and then I can do reporting on that. And so again, I think it's just a lot of like gathering and looking at it from time to time, and that you don't just set it up once. I'm constantly playing with it and adding new things. And shout out to, I mean, Kathy's heard this a million times. She has an amazing customer success department, and they're very they send out emails and they're like, here's a new feature we have. And being able to go in and look at that and think about how would this tool now help me do something else. But again, it's this idea of kind of always taking stock of where you are, and what you need. And then you just look and you kind of see where you get stuck over and over again.
I want to just double click on the thing that Margot talked about because, everyone's in a different place and maybe evaluating different things. Having a system that you can actually get your hands into, like Margot's talking about, and actually add fields, make changes, build more workflows yourself without your IT team having to be the intermediary layer. It frees you up so much. I can't even begin to tell you, right? Whether you go with Streamline or some other, like, I don't care. Get something that you can actually use yourself. Because when I was in your shoes, like, I had to go ask IT and beg them to make any change. And I was always at the very, very bottom of their prioritization list because every single revenue department, right? Every single department was prioritized above legal. So you literally can't get your work done. That becomes another massive bottleneck, right?
And if anyone who's had to leave a job and had someone be like, will you write down everything you do and all the steps that goes into everything you do so that the next person can do, and it's a skill that I've had to develop more as I've grown in my career. And like, what do I do, and how many, and not just the big steps, like what are the sub steps that go into this big step? And I think that can be really difficult to wrap your head around sometimes, and a tool can help you ask questions that you wouldn't even have thought to ask yourself. So I think those are all great points. Well, thank you again so much, Margot and Kathy. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having us. Take care. Great to see everybody.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day.